We went off to one of the shows and we bumped into Charles Cecil, who was working at Activision at the time, and he said, I think you should know that we've just done a deal with Hewson to buy the publishing rights to Paradroid 90. We've given him 75 grand, he's wandered off. We never saw a penny of that, and Activision are suddenly publishing our game. And it's still labelled up as a Hewson game, but it was Activision that actually published it, and we didn't get any royalties for it. And it's just it took me 10 months or something to put this together, and a lot of my own time. And it's just, what on earth? He's done it to us again. Oh, why is he waving his hand over there?
My friend.
You're all right? Yeah, just pay attention. I'm broadcasting.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the next talk from Zzap Live 2025. And as you'll see on the screen, we are talking about the making of Paradroid with Andrew Braybrook and Steve Turner. Hello! So I'm sure many of you know the story of Graph Gold, or indeed read the brilliant book, The Graph Gold Story from Fusion Retro Books that was published last year. If you don't, just a brief summary. Andrew and Steve met. We got a copy being shown over there. Andrew and Steve met through their mutual love of music and playing in bands, and when Steve decided to start programming games, he invited Andrew to join him. And so that began the company Graph Gold. And the particular game we're talking about today was actually Andrew Braybrook's second Gumball 64 game that was original. He had converted one of Steve's earlier games to the C64, 3D Lunar Attack. And just to go back to the beginning, Andrew, you first started learning to program in COBOL, and you produced a game called Survive on that. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about that game.
Yeah, absolutely. What I did was we used up all the games that were on the mainframe. We played them all to death. Advent, we had a Star Trek game that came with the IBM. So we started writing our own games, and that wasn't my first game, but I decided to write a multiplayer game that was set over 10 levels of sort of mini dungeon type thing. And the idea was that up to six players could play it. And the idea was to be the last person standing, and we had some computer-controlled assassins in there as well. And already in that stage, I had a system whereby you were only shown the other players that you could actually see by a line of sight, and I had the trackways secretly marked on the map so that the assassins knew how to traverse around the whole dungeon. In the evening, everybody would usually fold their arms at 5 o'clock, and 5:01 you were allowed to go. And then we took over the 6 terminals in the room, and we would just play this game for another hour. And I could see how multiplayer games where you've all got your own screens, but you can all shout at each other. It's not quite as sophisticated as now having headphones and talking to each other, but we just loved it. We had one computer terminal set up to just run the refereeing, where each player, as they moved around in their own time, it sent their position to the referee, and then the referee would send you everybody else's positions. And although it was not a real-time game, if you didn't press enter, you wouldn't get any updated information. You could send your moves, and as long as you were moving about, you'd get everybody's latest position. And the idea was that you place an X on the screen where you thought one of your enemies was, and as you pressed enter to get your new information, if you hit them, that would knock them out of the game. And there was one guy called Splodge. He was the office jester, I think, and he worked out that if you put lots of X's on the screen and then went bang, 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 bang on the enter button, you would actually fire a whole array of shots in a whole block of the screen, because it would only pick the first X and send it to the referee each time. And so I got the idea then that people will twist how you've written something to try to come to their own advantage.
And yeah, obviously the line of sight rules would then be an important part of what made Paradroid. Steve, do you remember when Andrew first started talking about the game that was going to become Paradroid? Do you remember those early stages of the game?
Well, I do, because I gave him the initial brief. Look, cute robots seem to be coming up in programmes on telly and films. Do a game about a cute robot. And he came back the next day with a little bit of paper, and I still got the bit of paper, and it had the idea of Paradroid just completely outlined on it. It had not the details of the transfer of the game, the fact that there will be a transfer game, the fact that you're going to go around, you're going to have a high-tech display, but essentially all the components of Paradroid were there before the game was begun, which was quite unlike any other of your games, wasn't it? Like normally Andrew would do a title screen while he tries to think up of what the game's going to be, but this was you know, I think you had a night round with your friends, didn't you, which kind of sort of discussing ideas and.
That's possibly it. Yeah, it's the only game that I've ever designed up front. Was he waving his hand over there?
My friend.
You're all right? Yeah, just pay attention. I'm broadcasting. Yes, yeah, this is the only game that I've designed up front where everything that was on the paper went in, very little extra went in. Most of the times the games do indeed come about organically, they come out in bit by bit, and I'm programming them as I'm thinking of ideas. But this one, yeah, I just came into work and I go, oh, I got it all here. And yeah, it's never happened before or since.
And there was one sort of big change early on in the project, in that early on you had a sort of targeting cursor, almost a gun sight, to control where you were shooting. And was that because did you find that control method difficult to use, and is that why it changed?
Yeah, went all the way back to the survive thing, where you put an X on the screen where you wanted to fire, and you could either move the robot or you could press a button and the robot would stop, and then you could control the gun sight. But because that left you vulnerable, because you couldn't move, it was very, very slow to operate, because then you've got to line the crosshairs on what you want to fire at and then press the fire button. You got an instant fire there, so there weren't any bullets. You instantly hit where you were aiming for, which I like the immediacy of that, but it was just too slow to line up. So yeah, it had to go.
I can remember all the algorithms. It went on for weeks, didn't it? Trying, because we consulted them, saying, well, try accelerating it, try do this, and the gun sight just became uncontrollable, trying to get it to stop at the place where you want, but to get there quick enough. You could either get it really controllable and get it across slow and stop, but that was too slow, or you got it really fast, but you couldn't stop it. So in the end, it just disappeared, didn't it? And
yeah, I had it running along in front of the player, more or less, but the fact is that you're trying to hit moving targets, and because they're moving, you've got to keep your gun sight moving all the time. It was too difficult. So we went back to conventional firing, which mercifully I had a few sprites left, and it worked a lot better, I think.
And I believe you had took quite a bit of work calculating the maths of the diagonal firing and things like that.
Yeah, well, yes, the diagonal firing, which is all related to the diagonal line of sight calculations, where you've got to step across the map in a number of different ways. If X is bigger than Y, because you only want to text as few characters as possible, and as soon as you hit a wall, you can say, right, that's it. I can't possibly see the other person. I had to get Steve to help me with that routine. That was beyond my maths at the time, and beyond my programming. But we worked that out and got that working.
And players and programmers alike got an insight into what was happening with Paradroid as it was developed, thanks to the diary and Zzap. So perhaps you could tell us how that originally came about.
I'd taken Gribblies up to Zzap Towers to meet the reviewers and hand the game over to them. I always like to do that so that I can show them how I think the game should be played and answer any questions that they have straight away. And I think that was well worth doing, because although that takes a day to visit Zzap Towers, I think as long as there's no misunderstandings about the game, you're going to get a better review, a more accurate review out of them, rather than them getting frustrated because they didn't understand something. While I was there, I got taken into Chris Anderson's office, who was the editor-in-chief, I think, wasn't he? And he just got this idea. It was either his idea or Roger Keane's idea to just try and do a diary of a game as it went along, and they said, we'll pay you. Proper journalist rates at 12p a word, I think. And all you have to do is write down every day what you've done, which only took about 10 minutes. And I've now got a document that's got all of the diaries written out in pencil as they happened. So they're unedited by even Mr. Hewson, who was intercepting them and rewriting stories about cats and rulers, which might have been amusing to him, but it wasn't the truth. So we bypassed him from then on. But I think Zzap were potentially shortening things for space as well, slightly. So I've got the unexpurgated version. We've still got all that documentation, it was no problem. You could sit there for 10 minutes every night saying, what have I done today? And then all I had to do was type it in and then print it out and send it off to them once a month. That was no trouble at all. We got a nice check at the end of the month, and I think it worked better than I could have imagined, really. I think I've had so many nice comments about how it inspired people. So.
Yes, I mean, it did, it obviously inspired other people to be a programmer, and also helped build the anticipation for the game. And I think this is just a fun little bit I've put in for this slideshow. If you look at the screenshot on the bottom right here now, it actually says cheese. Now there is an interesting reason behind this. I'm not sure how many people are aware, but at the time, to put a screenshot in a magazine, you had to take a photograph of the TV screen. Now obviously that caused all sorts of complications with shadows, lights, glare, and refresh rate of the television. So literally Cameron Pound, the photographer at Macintosh, Cameron Macintosh Open photographer at Newsfield, would have to put a blanket over his head and the TV screen so he could keep out all the extra light and take a shot of the screen. So built into Paradroid, if you go into pause mode and then press F8, all the animations of the characters on screen and the robots freeze. So it says cheese, so it's there ready for a photographer to take a picture of the screen.
Well, I like to leave the animation going in pause mode where it has no effect on the game, just to show that the game's still alive, it's all working. And I did that in Gribblies. Gribbly had cheese mode as well, where Gribbly turns to the screen and smiles. Cheese mode. If you haven't your photo taken, you've got to do it properly, haven't you?
We're getting a photo taken right now. And so the next thing I want to talk about is the actual robots, because obviously one of the key things that gives Paradroid its personality is the different types of robots that you encounter and can then take over. And as you travel around, you can go to the computer system on the ship and find out more details about the robots. And on screen we have here on the left is unit type 883, which may resemble a certain character from a famous TV show. And on the right then you have what is the strongest unit in the game, the Command Cyborg, which is usually found lurking around on the bridge. And so, Andrew, how did you come up with the different robot designs and then also display them in this information screens?
Well, there was, it took quite a long time to come up with 24 different robots. Once you've done a dozen, it takes longer to come up with new, different ones. But because the game can only show 8 robots at a time, and I'm animating them by dropping in lines of graphics to make the energy spin and things like that, and the numbers. I only needed 8 sprites in the game, plus the bullets. I had a lot of sprites left over to be able to draw those images. And I had to do a mechanism to where I drew the left-hand side of some of the symmetrical robots, and then I had a routine to flip the sprite data to make a right-hand image. So I had lots of bits and pieces to try to construct those robot pictures. Some of them are completely unique, like the 883, but you'll see common bits in some of the other robots where I managed to reuse them. And I put in a little dictionary system in there as well, so the words are just all numbered, so I can have a sheet of text where I just say I want number 7 followed by number 9, and I had to write all of those out in my book. And I think it saved space in the end. I never really actually checked, but it seemed logical to me to try to squeeze everything in to get everything that I wanted in there. I would have a dictionary and build up phrases like that rather than have the whole paragraph stored in memory. It just took a long time to come up with all of the robots, but I wanted there to be plenty of them so that you could go in and explore and find out about them.
And did you have a lot of memory left at the end when you had the complete game?
Not enough for even some music in the title, as it turned out. No, I think if I rearranged things, I got clever in rearranging things in my later games. But that game was pretty full up actually when I finished it. And so the reason it doesn't have any music is because there just wasn't enough space left for that.
So moving on, we're looking at the decks of the freighters, and on the left we have a floor plan, again which is available in the computer system, which shows you where items like the lifts are. And then on the right we have, this is actually from a retro game article I did on Paradroid. This was annotated in the magazine telling you about the different decks and what happened on them. But it's an interesting shape to the ship, and I find it very interesting that the lifts in different places, and some decks have multiple lifts. So how did you come up with this sort of design for the ship and the way the lifts work?
Well, I think this whole Paradroid really came about because I bought Shadowfire, if you all played that game, and I was a bit disappointed that I couldn't see as much as I thought I'd be able to see, because it was set on a space station, wasn't it? And I thought, well, I'll set mine on a spaceship, a freighter, so it's got plenty of big spaces in it. I wanted you to really be able to feel your way around a real ship, so all the decks fit together properly. I even built a Lego version of it to prove it. To have the side view so that you can move up and down the deck seemed logical way to navigate the place, and also to make you search in the 2 different halves of the ship and get around in different ways. So I wanted it to be a real place, not just an arbitrary map that didn't fit together properly, which some people I thought might be doing. I think it feels real. That's how that came about.
And I mean, there's some decks I find particularly memorable, such as the 2 tiny observation decks at the top of the ship, and things like the shuttle bay, where you can actually go into the shuttle, and almost there's a little hatch at the top of the shuttle that opens, and you can sit the droid in there. I find little touches like that were fascinating. And as you say, it helped to bring it to life, to really make it feel like a bigger ship, a part of a huge ship. Do you remember any particular challenges or some sort of inspirations for levels that you had?
Well, fortunately, because I based the whole game system around my Gribbly's scrolling system, which I had space in there for 16 levels on Gribbly's. And so I thought, well, 16 decks sounds like about the right kind of number, so I've only got to think of 16 different things. So I tried to be, again, logical. I'm a big Star Trek fan. I tried to be logical about it. We've obviously got a bridge. We want the big cheese on the bridge. We've got plenty of space for freight, which is where all the battle droids are going to be hiding. And you've got cruise quarters and things where all the crew have obviously been murdered by the robots. So there was enough, I think, to 16 different levels that gave us a reason for each one to be there.
Now, Steve, obviously one of your later games, Rana, used, I wouldn't say an identical lift system, but a similar sort of lift system where levels have more than one lift and you're travelling back up and down the levels. Do you remember how much inspiration you took from Paradroid and your game Kenilworth into Rana?
Yeah, it was more an inspiration because I had a graphics system which I'd shown to Houston. The game at that time was called Zzap, and I didn't know what game I was going to put on it. And at the same time, Houston was saying, "Oh, what about doing a Spectrum Paradroid?" Because Paradroid was selling really well, and I was saying, "I don't think I can do the scrolling well enough to do that." And we sat, and because if you looked at my maps top down, they looked very like the maps that Andrew was doing. And Andrew suggested, he said, well, why not just take my logic from Paradroid and match it with your graphic system? I thought, that's brilliant. So I actually took some of the code across in places like the transfer game is virtually identical. I think I found a bug in it, so it's got a little backwards. But yeah, other than that, it's the same. The lift system, yeah, I thought, yeah, that's good. The little where you get a little map and everything, the terminals were all just direct copies of what was there. Unashamedly, you know, I wasn't trying to hide the fact. The robot bumping system, whereby if a bigger robot hits a smaller robot, the smaller robot gives way to it, as it should do. That they were all the rules from the game, and I added a few weapons because I had a 3D display. I thought I need to utilise that a bit, so that there was some weapons just that fitted the 3D landscape.
The bouncing bombs.
Yeah, so that's right. But other than that, the intention was to take the gameplay of Paradroid, which we knew that would work, onto a graphical system that I had that worked, and married the two together, and it gave a game with a different flavour, but it was essentially underneath the same game.
Yeah. Great, so we'll come back to Crosstron in a little bit longer, but you mentioned there the transfer game from Paradroid, which, as you can see from the displays on screen, looks a lot like electrical circuits and logic gates. So Andrew, perhaps you could explain how you came up with the design.
Yeah, Steve showed me a picture of a circuit diagram in one of the books that he was looking at, and I like the idea of just the simplicity of the transfer game, where it's joining two pieces together, or you have to fire down two lines to get one output. You know, electrically I wasn't thinking what it was about, but I could see that by controlling the number of bullets that each side had based on the power of the robot that it was, you could balance the game, because you wouldn't want to take on a big battle droid with a 001 because you'd run out of bullets and it wouldn't. So you have to work your way up the robot ladder, and this thing where you're fighting for control in the middle just seemed to work out very nicely. I think at one point I had an early version where if it was a draw, it would toss a coin and say, well, I'll give the win to one side or the other, and test team very quickly told me they didn't like that, which is why you get a replay. If it's a draw.
Which is why you get the deadlock, as
the
you
deadlock,
see.
the deadlock situation, yeah, and you play a game, because it's a very quick game. doesn't take very long to play, and the other side, you get to choose which side you want, which wasn't in the original either, but because it can be very, very different, and you can have a very nasty side. You get to pick the nice side, which gives the player another little intelligent advantage there, and even though there's no intelligence to the way the enemy robots play, if you play Paradroid 90, there is intelligence in there because they do fire up the right routes. But it just works, and the player's got an advantage, and the player should have an advantage, and it makes you feel good when you win.
So, again, Steve, obviously you use the same design in Quasitron.
Yes, that's right. Another little thing that I remember, when I bought a new Spectrum, it came with one of these Sinclair educational programs, but it had like little circuits.
Make a chip.
Yeah, and when I got that, you run them up and look at them for 5 minutes. So I can remember us looking at it and saying, "Oh, there's a game in there somewhere." But that was some time before, and I'm sure that was part, at the back of the mind, because it had a similar kind of look. If you remember that, you kind of put a little circuit on, and I thought, well, this program looked very pretty, but what are you going to do with it? If you're not an electronic engineer, it was like a completely useless cassette that had about a 2-second appeal, but a very nice look. But I think this is kind of subconsciously inspired by that, because that was some time before, perhaps a couple of months. But it was such a lovely little game, and I was surprised how much people liked it. I was sort of wondering, a game within a game, are people going to think that's a bit funny? But everybody seemed to love it, so why not? It went in mine, and not only that, a lot of my follow-up games, I thought, well, I'm going to put a game in a game. If people like that kind of thing, it kind of gives you just a little break, like light and shade from the main play. So that became a trait in several of our games, didn't it?
Yeah, like in Rana Rama, where you're trying to rearrange the letters to spell Rana Rama.
Yes, absolutely. Just sort of something, you put a little bit of pressure and a little bit of different thought on the player. And I think it gives the game a bit more depth somehow, having something to do that feeds back into the main game.
Yeah, so Paradroid comes out, gets a gold medal review from Zzap, and does really well. And from that, we then have 2 updated versions of Paradroid, the competition edition and the later metal edition. So, Andrew, what was it like going back to the code, and what did you manage to achieve when you did update?
I tended in those days to keep the older games in the disc box, so they were nice and available there. And occasionally I'd think, oh well, maybe I'll change that, because I'd still like to play the games for a while after I'd finished them and before they were released. It's very naughty really, because once you've sent the master off, you're committed. So you don't want to find any bugs. But this was a bit later, and I was just tinkering with Paradroid, because I had this idea that there was some spare time in there somewhere. There wasn't any spare space, but there was some spare time. And it was synchronised to run at 17 frames a second, and I just thought, well, I want to see if it will run at 25. I'll just temporarily take out one of those synchronisations and see then what I have to move to make it work. And I just did that. I mean, I played it, and it was happily running, and I didn't have to move anything. I couldn't see any glitches. So suddenly it was running at 25 frames a second, which means it was also running 50% faster to the player. And I thought, well, shall I alter it to get the speed of the game back down, but the smoothness will be improved? And I thought, well, it's not 50 frames, and I definitely can't get 50, because I'm moving the colour map as well as the screen, and that's just too much data to move. But then I just thought, no, I really like it just playing faster. So I don't know what other people think about the fact that it was viciously faster. But then that was the competition edition, and then so obviously we're in the early Morpheus days, so that would have been late '86. And then I just wanted a platform to try out the graphics. I've done the font, and I like that. But I was thinking, can I make the game look nice with that graphic style? But I hadn't got anything to build the spaceship at the time. So what I thought was, I'll just drop those graphics into Paradroid again and have a look, and then suddenly get all this lovely metallic wall effects which have a different colour on the top of them to make them look more solid. And I thought, well, that looks really nice as well, and that's obviously running quicker too. So I sent that off to Houston as well and said, what do you think of this? And ultimately that got released too.
Steve, did you go back and play your own games much after you'd finished them?
I was normally too busy. But I always sort of thought, especially the big ones like Avalon and Dragon's Lair, I thought it would be nice to go back when I've forgotten like how to do it, because part of it is all the discovery and looking for things. But because I knew how to do it, I could play the whole thing through in a couple of hours. I thought, I'll put it away and I'll go back. And I didn't really go back until perhaps a couple of years ago when I recovered the source by downloading object code from the internet and running disassemblers on it and putting labels in, because we didn't have any source code on the Spectrum in those days. I used to write on little squared bits of paper, and daftly one day in Graph Code, I have manuals and manuals of this stuff, but no one's ever going to want this, I don't want it, and chucked them all away. I kept the graphics because I thought, they're quite useful. A magazine might want a shot of something. I thought no one's ever going to want to look, but it's a shame because it's all historic stuff. But luckily I kept all the Paradroid stuff and all those little pictures of the robots, the layouts, they're still there, all your pencil versions. And I can remember, I went on holiday, it was a lovely summer, and I can remember you were doing those layouts in the garden. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think so. I've looked at the manual, and I penciled them all in because in those days we hadn't got very many development tools, so I certainly hadn't got a mapper or anything to be able to create maps on the screen. So I was just happily shading them all in, beautifully done. There's no roughness to it.
It's funny, in those days Andrew would never go on holiday, and for years and years in Grafton I'd say, look, you've got holiday accumulated, and he'd take his holiday and then come into work, because that's how much we love doing it. To him, that's how he wanted to spend his free time, or he didn't want to go home at the end of the day. I had a 2-year-old son, and I used to work religiously. I'd start at 9, have a coffee break at 11, dinner 1 to 2, and my son knew he mustn't come in the room, and then, Daddy's coming home now for dinner, and it kind of kept him, like someone was saying, oh, there's a picture of you and you've got a suit on, although you worked at home. I'm at work, I've got my son, he knows I've got my suit on at work, and that showed Andrew, we're not mates, although we were good mates, but
He's the boss.
I'm Julie's the boss, but
Oh, yeah.
it was serious, and this is different. We've got to do it. We've got to make money. But I used to go home at 5:30. And Andrew went home when he wanted. But that's how it was. We really loved what we were doing. But I did try not to go and because I did the management side as well. If I opened that door and went in, then you get the thing, oh, there's a letter and you need to respond to that, and you think, oh, shall I do that now, and whatever. So it was best to kind of just leave that behind, get changed, and then I'm at home. So yeah.
I didn't have a C64 at home either, so I could play games at lunchtime, and I might sometimes be playing a game, but I had to use the work equipment because I didn't have the machine at home. So when I did go home, I was just computerless. It was terrible.
And we'll give Andrew a brief holiday now while we talk about the Quasitron and its follow-up. So obviously you introduced Quasitron earlier with the isometric display and the ramps and so on. So, I mean, what were the sort of the major hurdles you faced in developing the game, Steve?
I was very inspired by isometric games that I'd seen, and I can't remember the name of it, the famous one with the little knight.
Nightball, do you mean? Or
Yeah. And I think, how are they doing that? So I kind of worked out how to do something myself. I very quickly sort of experimented and I played Ant-Attack in the past, which was sort of one of the first sort of isometric games. And I didn't think that worked if you had bits where you went behind and that one you could swing it round and then your mind kind of completely lost where you were. It was very hard to kind of orientate yourself. And so I thought, okay, let's design a scene that just goes up and up and up and never kind of down behind things. And that's how that kind of layout kind of came about. But then I had to think, well, how do I get all those graphics on the Spectrum? Because there's just not space for it. And I did it in little parallelogram shaped sort of little sections. So there's a bottom of a wall piece, a mid wall piece, a top wall piece, and a floor joiner piece, a floor piece, and then a floor top piece. And with just those bits, hardly any graphics, I could build up these lovely sort of scenes that look really solid. And then of course I had to get it on the screen quickly, and I found, because I was using parallelograms, that meant every character I'm having to plot several times. I just couldn't, I wanted to have it scrolling about while I was doing the game, and I just couldn't get it fast enough. Every trick that I knew I put in. But in the end I compromised, and I did it so you go to the edge and it then sort of pushed over, which I kind of got away with. Afterwards I thought, I'm not sure whether I personally like that, but it kind of gave you the idea of the expansion. I think I just about got away with it. But that's the thing, I was jealous of the Commodore scrolling, I must admit. And if there was anything I could add to the Spectrum, well, it'd be a character mode so you can do scrolling, and two, the SID jet.
And of course then there was the follow-up Magnetron starring KLP2. I believe that was the first C64 game you worked on personally.
It was, and the idea at the time, Houston was coming to us and saying, sales were plummeting, we need to bring the games out quickly. He actually sort of was saying, why not do a game a month and we'll sell them as a budget game, and you'll get 10p a version, a sale for them, but we'll sell millions of them, so you'll make a lot of money, and you're so fast you can reel these out. And I'm thinking, what kind of game is it going to be, doing a game a month? So I thought, well, how can I, what can I do in this sort of situation? I thought, right, if I take a game where I know the gameplay works, but tinker around with that, so basically I'm not starting from scratch. I can get a quick game, but what I'll do is design it for two machines at once. So then I've got effectively double the market. So it was quite a brave thing to do, because at that time I hadn't really done much on the C64. So I did the Spectrum version first, and I took the whole of the Z80. I was quite amazed, Andrew, my approach, because I didn't try and do one routine and another. I converted the whole thing to 6502 and then tried to get one routine after another. But I was using kind of macros to change every load A instruction to the equivalent in...
I remember how disappointed you were when it didn't work first time.
Yeah, so I must admit, I have a soft spot for Magnetron. It didn't get particularly good reviews, but I did enjoy it. And there's several interesting systems in there, in that you have to take account of the weight of the robot, and then there's positive and negative charges. So do you think it develops the ideas from Quasitron in an interesting way?
I think it did, and that's what I was deliberately trying to do. I was thinking, what more can I put? Probably influenced a couple of games out, like the ball bearing game and whatever. And I didn't get jumps in it, but I was sort of considering that sort of thing. I mean, unfortunately, it was caught up with all the politics of when we were told Houston was going bankrupt, and their marketing manager left the company and moved to Telecomsoft, and then asked us, she said, look, you know, if you leave your product there, you're not contracted with it to use, and it's going under. It will never be published. But if you come across to us, we've got a legal fund. We'll fight any legal action for you. But we're sure, because there's no contracts, and they took us to see their solicitors. Oh yeah, it's all right. There'll be no trouble. You know, we'll do this. But it all ensued in a court case, took ages to get on the market. By that time I was completely depressed, because at one time it didn't look as though either version could be published, and I was trying to finish the C64 version. I always intended to finish it and then to say, okay, right, now what can I do on the C64? And I did envisage adding scrolling so that I could keep him in the centre and the rooms at least scroll about, perhaps even redesign the rooms so that they were bigger, because it was really fast, the system that I had, because I could flick the rooms instantly. I got so that the build was far quicker than the original, so you go off one side and boom, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to speed up the whole kind of gameplay, so I was really pleased with that. But then I thought, well, Commodore users would expect the scrolling, and that it was always my intention to kind of add that level of stuff. But in the end, I just didn't get to do that. I thought I'd wrap it up, you know, put it. I'll never put out a sub-quality game, get it nice and tuned up so the game works and whatever. Boom, put it over, start on the next thing. But they were already coming to us with, they said, oh, can you do this arcade game? Someone's let us down. We're in Flying Shark on the Spectrum. Can you do it in 6 weeks? You know, get it out. We'll pay you lots of money for it. Lots of money. So I had a word with Dominic, you know, who did the Iridium version of a Spectrum version of Iridium, and he said, yeah, I think I can do it. So then all of a sudden, you know, 6 weeks we had that, and I did both conversions of that, both the Amstrad and the Spectrum. No, I did the Amstrad version, and Dominic did the Spectrum version. But I was kind of trying to finish this off, because I did employ a guy to do the Amstrad version, but it didn't work out. So I had to do that myself, and I think I did that conversion, was it 5 days? It took me, but I was just seemed to be crazily working, because we had a new office. We were trying to do that. Took on loads of new employees, so it was quite a busy time for me. And it was just at the first stage where I got where I can't be the thing that I wanted to do, which is develop and do the programs. I used to do the music and the graphics. I just can't do all that and manage a company and do the vacuuming and clean the toilets and do the accounts. And I was doing absolutely everything, you know, and I had to sort of start thinking, you know, this isn't working anymore. And, you know, I'll have to sort of start getting people to do other things, you know.
So sort of the unofficial third game in the trilogy is Viracrop on the Amiga. It doesn't actually feature KLP2, it features DAVE, or Dave for short, and so that has a lot of similarities to the earlier KLP2 games. And also on the Amiga, you went back to Paradroid with Paradroid 90. So how did that come about, Andrew?
It was after Rainbow Islands, and I was thinking, what am I going to do next? And I'd waited so long to get onto the Amiga, and the ST of course, and have more colours and all those lovely little pixels. So I think I just felt that I could speed up, or I had speeded up Paradroid, and I would like to have got this to run at 50 frames a second, which I couldn't do either. But I wanted to reimagine it in 16-bit basically, because it was a strong game, and I'm pretty sure we were asked if we'd like to do that, and I thought we can improve the transfer game, because we can put some intelligence on the other side, and we can make it a little bit bigger, and we can draw some nice graphics. I drew some of the graphics for the backgrounds in Paradroid, but we had proper graphics artists at that point, so we handed a lot of the work over to them, just to improve the look of it. And I thought, well, the gameplay works. Let's do a new version for the new machines.
Steve, did you have much input into Paradroid 90?
I was way too busy on other things, but I mean, Andrew was wanting to do this on the Amiga since the Amiga come out, but since the split up with Hewson, there was no way we could do it, because I knew Hewson would claim rights, because there was a thing in the contract, any kind of derivative program he has to get first offer. But Andrew was sort of straining it a bit, wanting to do it, but then I think it was Paul Chamberlain reached out to me and said, look, how about doing something for us again, and we'll make sure the terms are right and we have a proper contract. And I was very iffy, but Andrew so much wanted to do it. I said, okay, send us a contract and I'll have a look. And it actually wasn't too bad a contract. It was a lot better than our old ones. And it actually proved very, very good to us, because it had a clause in saying if we went insolvent or bankrupt and all this stuff, all the rights to the game passed to them. And I can say, well, if that statement's there for you, I want the reverse. Knowing that they almost went insolvent once, and I thought, and they understood that, and how that came really beneficial for us. What wasn't for this game. I used the same contract when we did Fire and Ice for Microsoft, because Microsoft went down, and I was taking him through, and they tried to bully me into signing the contract, saying, "Oh, we own all your contracts now." No, you don't. I've got this clause in here. And the funny thing was, it wasn't only me. I was on the phone to John Hare telling him the story, and he says, "Wait a minute, let me go and get my contract." And he had a look, and he says, "I've got your clause in my contract." And so it saved Sensible Soccer as well. So that was the one thing that we got out of that Paradroid thing, because we didn't get any royalties at all, did we, Paradroid 90?
No, we went off to one of the shows and we bumped into Charles Cecil, who was working at Activision at the time, and he said, "I think you should know that we've just done a deal with Hewson to buy the publishing rights to Paradroid 90. We've given him 75 grand, he's wandered off. We never saw a penny of that. And Activision are suddenly publishing our game." And we, it's still labelled up as a Hewson game, but it was Activision that actually published it. And we didn't get any royalties for it. And it's just, it took me 10 months or something to put this together, and a lot of my own time. And it's just, what on earth, he's done it to us again.
On top of that, we were doing a PC Engine version, which was really nice, because the ships were redesigned so it could scroll sideways as well.
Yeah, that was unfortunately a limitation of the ST, in that you didn't have a smooth scroll horizontally, so you switched the decks to be more or less vertical in Paradroid 90.
I did briefly, because I think I sitting next to Dominic, and I actually took him on as a lodger at one point, because if people remember 1990, the mortgage rates went up to about 15%, and I'd have financially sunk if I hadn't taken on a lodger, and he was saying, "Well, I'm looking for a place to go." So I did briefly have a 4-colour scrolling version on the ST, but the backgrounds just really weren't up to the 60. I knew I was going to get caned for not having all the colours all the time, but I did have it scrolling at 50 frames, and driving around scrolling left, right and up and down, using pre-rotated graphics and what have you, and it did work, but I don't think it would have looked good enough for the journalists at least. So we used the Rainbow Islands vertical scrolling system on the ST version, and because we'd done so much data for all the backgrounds, and they'd all been created in a mapper, and they'd probably taken the graphics artist months to do it, we weren't going to redo those just so that we could scroll it sideways. You get the same play area in terms of number of pixels on Paradroid 90 as you do on a C64 one, and I saved you having to scroll left and right, but nobody appreciated that. I got caned rather.
So, have you ever thought about going back to the Paradroid style of game and making a new one?
Yes, yes I have. I'm writing some games now on the PC, and I'm building all the mechanisms that would enable Paradroid to work, and it will scroll left and right. I may have to call it Andrew Braybrook's Paradroid 3 or something like that. But I'd like to think that if I live long enough, I will get something out to you.
And great, so that brings us to the end of the questions I've got, so we'd like to throw it over to the audience now. Hands up, who's got a question?
Here we go. I don't know why they don't work. Thank you, Lord.
They worked fine when they're not needed, and then as soon as they needed, they stopped working.
Train off and off.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. This is probably going to be a very quick one because the answer is probably no. But you mentioned the PC Engine version of Paradroid. Did I hear that right?
Correct.
Yep.
How far did you get with that?
It was almost finished.
Oh, God.
I'm
There's a man here who'd be very interested in it.
It was Gary Forman
in your
was
game,
writing
wasn't
it, and it's still got a lot of materials from it, but he never quite finished it. And unfortunately, Hudson Soft, who were the company in America who had contracted with Houston, they didn't know anything about us and the fact that we were developing it. They thought it was being done in-house in Houston. So when I informed that Houston had gone bust and saying, look, don't worry, we'll still finish it for it, all I got was, you pack up the kit immediately and send the kit back. And I was saying, look, I'm saying we're almost done, we can finish it, please let us finish it. I knew that how much money was left in the milestones we haven't had, and he says, oh, you don't understand, we've already paid Houston the milestones. So I had to think about it and said, look, we were getting a royalty in it, I'll finish it just for the royalties. I'm prepared to do that because, you know, you want to see your work out there. So we were almost there, but sadly it's not finished, and you know, without the specialised kit, I doubt if it'll ever be.
Yeah, that's such a shame. It would have been really nice to see a PC Engine version. Thanks.
Yeah, we had to make a slightly narrower screen because I think the screen on the PC Engine is 256 pixels, but we had it scrolling. We were going to do a 2-player version as well, 2-player simultaneous. And we were using a lot of the graphics from the Amiga one, but so you get a nice scrolling situation, and I think it was going to be really nice. Yeah, so I'm sorry. We were stitched up again by that bloke.
Any more questions?
Gentleman over there as well. A lady over there.
Without saying different deck designs and music, if you'd had more memory left for the game, what else would you have wanted to have put into Paradroid?
Into which Parad? Or
The original.
C4
Yeah.
Paradroid.
Yeah.
Well, it would have been nice to. Well, realistically, I mean, you're not going to be spinning your robots and things around in the deck maps. I think I got it fairly comprehensive because being able to log on to the consoles gave you access to see plans of the ship, of the deck. I don't think I didn't have to take anything out to make space other than music. So yeah, we'll have some title music, absolutely. That's about it. I think it was pretty complete, and I think the fact that Zzap gave us 100% for presentation, which I think was marvellously generous. We got everything in there. I'd made a bigger screen area, I think, probably. That's about it.
You mentioned briefly that to save time, you duplicated one half of a sprite or whatever to make the other half data. Did you do that in real time or as your dev tool?
It was doing it in real time. It was only a single one-off operation to create the right-hand side, but it was doing it at runtime. And it didn't have to be that quick because it only does it just as that screen is coming up.
Yeah.
So, but it saved me a lot of sprite space because I hadn't got enough sprite space to do. All 8 sprites are used for each image, except the very short ones. and 8 times 24 is too many. Yeah.
Who's next? Very reserved hands today.
Hi. So if memory doesn't completely fail me, which sometimes does, I kind of remember in one of your diary entries you mentioned that Steve had devised a way to compress 3 bytes of information into 1 byte. I wonder if either of you still remembers how that happened.
I think we were probably talking about, we were using bit settings rather than, so it wasn't 3, 4 years, not where you're going to get compressed 24 bits into 8, but whereas, I mean, I've seen it later in industry where people have, they're wasting a long 32-bit value on an indicator which can only be true or false, and you think, well, I've used bit settings from day one just to make sure. So it was probably just instead of having a 3-bit value, a 3-bit and a 2-bit value, I squashed them all into 1 byte. It was probably as simple as that.
Yeah, I can remember it well. Because it's looking at the date, saying, hey, well, how many values of this you got? Well, you only need so many bits for that. Because you're only going up to this amount. You've just got to shift it and mask it to get it. I mean, it costs you a little few lines in code to get the data, but the savings over a lot of data can be well worth it. And I was used to doing that when I did Avalon and Dragon Talk. I had a lot of data in there. I'd really compress the stuff down, so there was just absolutely no redundant bits at all in the data. And so I was used to those kind of techniques, just used them all the time.
And I still do that to this day. In my new game, I'm compressing bits into longs. You know, I've got about 7.5 gigabytes spare on my computer to do it. So it's in there. I cannot waste space in my programs. I cannot do it.
I mean, that seems to be a skill they're not teaching in university courses these days. Is compression and optimization.
Yeah, absolutely. We got new guys coming into our business company, and they're just, the way they're writing code, I mean, it works fine and it's fine, and there's space available to do it. But you know, I would say to them, you know, you could have done that you could have put 6 bits into that and used ands and ors to get it out, and they go, what? So yeah, they're not teaching them the low level stuff.
It is an example of how we used to work together, though, because if one of us had a problem, we were sitting right next to each other. We'd say, "Oh, yeah, what can I do to do this?" And we'd swap ideas, and Andrew would put ideas into my stuff as well when I was stuck. And he'd say, "What about that? What about that?" And it was good having 2 of us that we'd both been professional programmers, and we both knew structured programming, so we could draw little diagrams and explain things, even though we didn't know each other's assembler languages in those days, but we could kind of talk text speak sort of the way we understood, which was really good, having a mentor like that sort of sitting next to you, and I think it improved what each one of us did. Plus there was a kind of rivalry in what we did. If Andrew did something in one of his games, then I thought, well, I have to do it in mine, or if I did it, he'd try and do it better in
yeah, there'd be secretive things, you know, because I didn't want him to see me doing something and not see it finished. I'd sort of been hiding a bit. You're not going to see this until it's finished, and then I go, look what I've done here. It's all fantastic.
Learn the McCartney job, is it?
Yeah. And did you share much or learn much from programmers outside of Graph Gold? Did you share techniques and tips with others?
Yes. You kind of traded kind of things, like if you'd found something and you knew that they had a game that had a particular thing, you wondered how they did it, you kind of traded your knowledge with those, and we met up at shows, and you collect a network of people who you phone, and I certainly did, and you got things like spike multiplexing from someone, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. The Zzap programmer challenges, I did 2 of those, and so there was Tony Crowther, Archie McLean, Jeff Minter, and I was surprised at how open people were about sharing ideas. And Tony Crowther, he'd just written Trap and he couldn't wait to tell me how his sprite multiplexer was working. He said, "You'll have fun with this." And we never traded code. No, but there was never any exchange of code because you don't have to put it in an envelope and post it, I suppose. But we would tell each other how we did something, and so 2 weeks later, I got my multiplexer up and running as shown in the Zzap diaries of Morpheus. And yeah, if you know something can be done, and somebody's even told you how they did it, all you've got to do is write it. So yeah, absolutely, it's brilliant meeting them. I remember Jeff Minter saying to me one time, he said one of his mates told him he'd only written 4 lines of code that week, and Jeff said, "Well, as long as it's 4 good lines."
And of course, it's always a pleasure to meet the programmers from the 80s and 90s at events like this. So I'd like you all to give us a big round of applause, please, for Andrew and Steve. They will be signing at the table over to the side here after this, and stick around for the Psygnosis talk at 1:30.
If I could just say, I've got some signed pictures of what I'm working.
The music's good. I didn't never heard them until you. What is this fetish? When you listen to music.
Yeah, well, the music is perfectly played, and they are so well trained and well drilled and well determined. No, they're just.
They're fit, you can see it now because they're older.
Yeah.
Back then when I met you first, they were
just cute.
They were just cute kids, yeah. Now they're fit.
What was the name of the chap?